Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Classics Show. I am your host, Shabnum Riaz. Well, today we're going to talk about literature and research, and we're going to talk about, the current trends, are they addressing our needs, and lots of other things in the program today. So we're very happy to have with us our guest in the studio, Dr. Sheraz Dasti, who is the Assistant Professor, Department of English for the International Islamic University. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so to start, today's program, a very basic question: what is literature research?
Literature research is a systematic way of studying literature. Usually, we have lenses for that, angles for that, and the methodology for literature research is literary theory, which we now call as postmodern literary theories, that include a whole range of angles or lenses, including feminism and eco-criticism and Marxism, post-colonialism, which is more relevant for our context, post-structuralism. So these are different ways of looking at literary texts. So using those angles, we systematically analyze literary texts, be it poetry or prose, novel, short fiction, flash fiction. So that is literature research in brief.
Right, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are the current trends of literature research and literary criticism that are, predominant in the country at the moment?
Because we keep following the Western route whenever we do. I mean, English comes from the West. So we follow Western literary theory and Western models. So I would like to briefly talk about what is happening over there in the West.
Yeah.
In Western academic, the literature departments, they align their research with the current issues of their society that are identified by their society as problems.
Right.
For example, nowadays there is a lot of hue and cry about environment, climate change. So this climate change is bringing this awareness to the literature departments that we should be doing eco-criticism. So eco-criticism is being taught, and eco-critical studies are being conducted in all American universities,
right.
and even in the UK, in other European universities. Similarly, there is a lot of research that is happening on another recent issue, that is immigration, because there was this immigrant crisis in Europe and North America after the Syria crisis.
And then that leads to the shaping of political thought as well.
Yes. So they are doing a lot of immigration and integration studies. Then recent last year there were women marches in the U.S. So they have kind of led this whole debate, a kind of shift from the East to the West again of feminism.
Right.
Because earlier it had shifted, all the focus had shifted to the third world. There were, academics were talking about the ways to improve women's life in the third world countries. But then because of the alleged misogyny on part of a politician, they started coming out and kind of bringing the whole focus back to home.
Right.
So there is feminist studies are again being conducted in the Western academia. Similarly, post-colonial trauma, as it is reflected in American literature or Western literature, English literature. So that is also being studied even today. So my argument is that most of the researches that happen over there, they are aligned with the needs or the contemporary burning issues. For us, this is to some extent it's not the case. Ironically, we have bigger, and the number of issues is more.
Absolutely,
yes,
there's a huge domain.
Yeah, so that is not happening because we somehow keep fishing for those buzzwords coming from the West. And
So why are we so influenced so easily? Why?
I
Why
think
not
it's because of our training. It's English again, so the textbooks come from there. Our curricula is inspired by the English departments in the West. Most of us are trained in the West. So because of that, and then this race to say something new, something that is hot, that nobody has heard in Pakistan. This craze has somehow made us to do research in those domains which have no immediate relevance to our context. Therefore, those studies, they sometimes don't seem grounded in the country. I was studying frequencies of literature research in Pakistan at in fact, two of the major universities in Islamabad. And the results were, they were not only disproportionate, they were upsetting as well.
I see.
Because there is huge imbalance. 49% of all the theses that have been conducted in those two universities in Islamabad, in English departments, they focus stereotyping, representation, identity crisis, and other such, abstract issues. 16% of these theses are in feminism, 8% in eco-criticism, 8% in diaspora studies. Now, these are, I know that these all are the important issues, and perspectives on them are also significant.
Of course.
But this huge shift, this clear shift from the economic to the cultural, this will not do much good to a country like Pakistan.
Absolutely.
Because
where there are so many, as you
so
just
many
pointed
issues,
out,
yes.
There's so many issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
That need to be talked about.
Yes.
Okay, so how do we increase the identifiable nature? How do we get people to, focus on homegrown issues?
I think it's important that we should look at what is happening around us within the country. And, Pakistan is a country which is economically pressed, all of us know. And in this country, 44% of the children are stunted. 35% of them are born stunted, which means 9.6 million children are malnutrition, chronically malnutrition. 14% of the women of reproductive age are undernourished. And then, this 40% of Pakistanis live in acute poverty. So when we have these teeming millions, and we are not talking about the exploitative economic systems, when they are reflected in our literature as well. I mean, there is one thing that our literature is not fictionalizing these issues. There is another story, but there are stories, there are narratives, there are novels and poetry works that have represented these issues. Those teeming million are being represented. So my case is that they should be then reflected in the academic criticism as well, literary research as well.
Exactly, right. So let's talk about linguistics as well. That's also an important area,
Yes.
Of this. I was very surprised to know, when we were speaking before the program, that linguistics as a subject is where in Pakistan?
It's nowhere. Because...
That is quite amazing.
Yes, it is.
What's the reason for that?
There's not a single department of linguistics in Pakistan. There was one in Quaid-e-Azam University. It started in 2009, but it has been closed now. I mean, it's nowhere. And probably it's because the people don't see utility of this subject. I don't know. But there are a couple of subjects that we teach at English departments, but sometimes it's sociolinguistics that we teach, applied linguistics, discourse analysis, everything that is not pure linguistics. So when we don't teach that scientific pure linguistics, whatever we study, that does not make us linguists.
Right.
And unfortunately, most of us, we believe that we are linguists. There are many linguists in Pakistan, which is not the case.
Right.
I mean, studying...
So what's the difference? What a person who studies linguistics, what are they skilled in?
They are trained in pure linguistics. They are trained in a systematic way in the subjects that are core linguistic subjects, that is syntax, morphology, phonetics and phonology, semantics, those subjects that deal with the structure, utterance and meaning of the language. And in most of our departments, because in the English departments, the need is not to go for the core linguistics. And sometimes, I mean, like at International Islamic University, at my university, we do teach a couple of core linguistic subjects at even undergrad level.
Right.
But they are beginning level course, introductory courses, and advanced level courses are not taught.
Okay.
So-
Do you find students who want to go ahead with the subject?
Yes,
and
they do.
Right.
There is, in fact, there are many people who, at the English departments again, who want to become linguists. But what happens is when they do their masters in English, which is MA in English, sometimes language and literature, sometimes linguistics and literature, most of the courses that they study are in literature. There are a few courses that are in linguistics, and when they apply for example, PhD in linguistics abroad, they would tell them that you haven't studied enough of linguistics, therefore you are not eligible.
Eligible for
yes.
it. Okay.
So that is what is happening, and this is unfortunate because most of the people, not just in the English department, but in other language departments as well. In Urdu, in Pakistani languages departments, they believe that they are doing linguistics, and somehow now even in HEC, they are thinking that, okay, so if there are these two streams in the English departments, then why not we specify that these are the people who should be doing linguistics and these should be the people doing research and supervising research in literature. But my argument is that would not do much good, because unless we have separate, dedicated linguistics departments, linguistics will not promote. And if that is not promoting, our languages are not developing. Because we are sitting in a time when the world is going for computational linguistics. All the languages are being computed, and our languages, they don't have still that minimum online representation. I was recently contacted by a dictionary making organization from Germany, and they were like, so because there is no online representation for Punjabi, we want to make an online dictionary for Punjabi, and would you be willing to work for that? So nobody is thinking of that in Pakistan.
That is a tragedy.
Yes.
Imagine.
Yes, and that is the case with Urdu language as well.
So, okay, I ask you this question. Why are we not owning what we have? Why why are the other things so attractive for us, and what we actually have? Why are we not owning them?
I think it's primarily because of the lack of vision and lack of awareness. There are, we have institutions, corpus planning institutions, institutions like National Language Promotion Department. They are doing wonderful job. They, in fact, for their time, they have been doing great jobs, and all these institutional heads, they were visionary people. But now I feel that the times have changed, right? So new people need to be contacted, those people who have awareness of what is happening around in the world. For example, I know many computational linguists in Pakistan. They're doing odd jobs. There are a couple of them who are teaching at colleges, at schools. So their expertise, their skills are not being used. They're not being exploited by our organizations. So on one hand, we have computational linguists. There is no institution. For example, in an institution that is a corpus planning institution for Urdu language, for the development of Urdu language, so that it is able to carry the burden of official language, which it is not doing right now. Despite the fact that even, constitutionally, Urdu is the official language since 1988. Recently, Supreme Court has given a decree in 2015, I guess, that Urdu be made the official language of Pakistan.
Yes.
It should be, this
Yes.
should be implemented. But that is not happening because these corpus planning departments, they have not, gone along with the pace that is
In fact, reflective of what you're saying. It's sometimes a bit sad to hear our children who are studying in, English medium schools, that when it comes to their own language, they're usually struggling.
Yes.
And when they're being taught Urdu, or they're revising at home for exams, you'll hear the same thing over and over again. The teacher's saying that, the child is not doing well in Urdu, whereas they're doing very well in English, and they're very strong in all the other subjects. When it comes to Urdu, they're struggling. So,
Yes.
That's alarming, is it not?
And the reason behind that is the same, that we have not digitalized it. Those kids are playing with iPhones and, all these technological gadgets, and Urdu is not there. Or if it is there, it's funny. Because there are some Google projects, NSA funded projects in the USA, in IIIT Hyderabad, in India, in other countries, who are trying to work on Urdu. And we are not doing anything ourselves. So that Urdu, when you go for Google translation, for example, it still is a funny translation that we get from there. And the reason is that they have funding, they have experts in computational linguistics, but they don't have experts in Urdu. So when they build parallel corpora, that is faulty. So that is where this whole problem happens. We have, there is one person in Pakistan, we must appreciate his efforts, Dr. Sarmad Hussain. He is running a language engineering institution in UET Lahore. And his efforts are, we can't leave the whole big project to one person. He's trying his best. So, for example, his software that is Urdu Mutakallim, that you speak and it will be written. Or you type and it will speak to you.
Text
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So he is doing a bit of work. Again, I would say that because Urdu is not digital language, it's not as developed as English is, and then we probably are not owning it. There is this kind of linguistic hierarchy in Pakistan, that on top it's English.
Right.
So the people who believe that they should be on top, they go for English. So they keep ignoring Urdu the whole life, and when they go to these English medium schools, they end up lacking behind other students who might have invested in the language.
Yeah,
yes.
Because you find that some of the children and the students. Okay, now there's a funny sort of a situation. Okay, it's really. It's quite intriguing, actually, that you have the children who are in the English medium schools who are not familiar with the Urdu, and then you have the children who are come from the Urdu medium schools who are then, they're having problems with English.
Yes.
So they go through a certain phase of education, and then when they come to universities, then they face a huge issue when it comes to subjects being taught in English. So there's a big jump that they have to make there. How can we address that? What can be done?
Yes, you're right. These people who have anxiety of learning English language, they are more in number, of course, because more number of people in Pakistan belong to lower classes, and then those who belong to lower middle classes. So they don't have access to good quality education, or that particularly in English. Otherwise they are fine, and they are talented, skilled children.
Very intelligent, very bright.
Brains,
so
yes.
it makes you feel really bad that they have to be at a disadvantage just because of the command of language.
Yeah, that's true. I have been running this English language center at the International Islamic University, and in the orientation session I used to say one thing, and that was psychological barriers and how to do away with them. Because these kids, when they sit along with, or when they have to compete with those kids coming from English medium schooling systems, they feel shy, and there are many psychological barriers. And psychological barriers are those things that, we see barriers in Islamabad on roads. So when we see them in front of us, what happens is our journey becomes longer. So when we have our own inner, these barriers that we have developed within our minds, they keep making our journey of learning the language difficult and longer. So I used to, tell them that English is just a language, it's a skill. We call them skills, speaking and listening and reading and writing. And skills are learned with practice.
Right.
I mean, language learning is like learning any other skill, like driving. So how do we learn driving? Is just
Practice.
a case of practice, yes.
Practice.
It's a matter of practice. So in the beginning, when we do driving, we are conscious of everything.
And everyone watching us.
Yes.
And making a mistake.
Yes, and I mean, it's we have to think and then go for the gear, and we think first and then press the accelerator, and everything is happening consciously.
True.
But once we do enough of practice into that, we are automaticity is developed. And when that automaticity is developed, we become skillful, and then we keep talking on telephones, which is not advisable, of course. And we keep talking to our friends sitting next to us on the passenger seats, back seats, and we are confident because the whole thing happens automatically. That is the case with language. So I think in Pakistan, when we teach our students, particularly those students who learn the language, English language, at a later stage, we don't I mean, there is a lot of pressure on them, and they don't realize that this is a skill, and if you have to go from one level to the other level of proficiency, you need to invest 200 hours of time into each of the language skills. So it means that if you include grammar into the skills, you need 1,000 hours of practice in the English language to become proficient, to in fact go from the basic level to the intermediate level.
We're talking about 1,000 hours in what time frame?
I mean, it depends on the students. So there are students who keep learning for 14 years, and they are still unable to invest that much time, and therefore, like, I mean, our BA, the people do graduation, but still they are not good in English, just because they have not invested enough of time. They do, routing and, parroting of things, and haven't invested much time, and therefore they end up learning not a good English. But if they keep doing that, I mean, if they focus on this thing, specify a lot of time, this 1,000 hours, within 3 months, for example, or 6 months, they would be, going to the next level of proficiency. Right. So it's again, that if a student is just attending the class and not doing anything other than that at home, in his or her free time, he's not going to be proficient because they are thinking that they are investing time in the learning of English language, but they are actually not.
Absolutely true.
Yes.
Dr. Sheraz, we're going to get back to exactly this topic because I think this would be very, very helpful for our viewers who are watching and having trouble with English. Right now we're going to go for a break, so don't change the channel. Welcome back to the programme. And, before we went to the break, we were talking about something really interesting. We were talking about, the command on language. Yes. We were talking about both situations where children or students, living in Pakistan have a poor command on Urdu, which is, really regrettable. Yes. And then also we have the majority of students, and then of course, they're making their way through life, adults as well, yes, who have had problems, barriers in speaking or writing or using English as a language. You were speaking about the psychological barriers, and what you were saying was very helpful. How can we help? What tips can you give?
I think there are a couple of things. One, these learners should not allow anyone to ridicule their language.
That's so important.
When we teach, I come from Urdu medium schooling system, and of course I have tried hard to learn this language. So when a student is already discouraged because he's already disadvantaged just because of this language, right, and then in a classroom or anywhere in any other situation, whether it is professional situation or domestic situation, social situation. So when somebody laughs at your words, you are discouraged.
Of course.
So that is kind of silencing whenever you become, the kind of laughing stock, just because of the way you speak a particular language.
Of course.
I tell my students that, see, in literature, in linguistics, there are concepts that encourage you that your language, your way of speaking a language is okay, and it is 100%. If you are intelligible to a person who is your audience, who is kind of interlocutor in a speech event, you are fine. Your language is good. For example, in sociolinguistics, there is a concept that is called as idiolect, which means that I speak my own dialect.
Of course.
So my language would be different from your language, and the way you speak would be different from another person's language,
Definitely.
right? So whenever somebody laughs at some learner, he should tell, kind of retaliate that he is speaking his own idiolect.
Yes.
And then, for all of us who learn English as a second language in Pakistan, our accent is different. We speak Pakistani English, and in post-colonial theory, and even in the linguistics field of world Englishes, it is now established fact that we speak a different English.
Of course.
It's Pakistani English. It is recognized, or at least the South Asian English is recognized.
Exactly.
So we should not be worried about the way we speak. And why are we not able to speak like, for example, Americans, or a certain individual who speaks American accent in Pakistan?
Exactly.
So we should not be worried about that.
And that's a very, very important point that you have raised, because what we find happening is that people are worried about many angles.
Yes.
Number one, it's the grammar of the language. Are they speaking it properly? Second thing, they get really, really entangled in, I would say, they really get entangled in this crisis, is that we don't have the right accent. And then, because I used to host a program called Mind Your English, and we had people used to come on the program, and we used to tell them that, accent is actually part of your identity.
Yes.
Because that tells the person where you are from.
Yes.
So the thing you actually need to worry about is the pronunciation, rather than the accent.
And intelligibility.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
That's true.
So that's something that is very, very important for viewers and for people who are watching the program, that it is not as much of a of a myth that it is made to be, and not as much as a horror as it made, because for some people it does bring on a lot of anxiety.
Yes. So all the teachers and the learners, they should be focusing first of all on doing away with these psychological barriers.
Right.
Once they are done with that, then the next thing that we need to tell our students is that now English is all around us, right?
Yeah.
It is
You can't
in
escape
our
it.
cell phones, yes.
Yeah.
It is everywhere. So once you are done with your classroom activities, then do English activities in a natural way.
Yeah.
I tell my students that they should switch the medium of their habits and hobbies.
Okay.
So that is one way of doing it. For example, if they watch, news channels, instead of watching Urdu news channels, they should, for the time being, when they are learning the English language, they should switch to PTV World and the other English news, medium channels. And if they are interested in reading newspapers, they should be reading English newspapers. If they do a lot of text messaging, do it in English. So there are many things that they can do without, if they watch movies, start watching English movies for that time period. I'm not advising them to, stop doing our own cultural things.
No.
They should be doing that for that period of time when they are trying to improve their language skills. So that is one thing. Secondly, there are a lot of many apps on English language grammar, improving, enhancing your English reading skill and speed in that. So there are many apps. You just write English language apps or English grammar apps, or you can download them. There are funny, interesting apps that are engaging as well. So you can download them, use them, and that would be very helpful.
Okay.
So there are a couple of things, because classroom activity might not be enough. And then in the classroom as well, I used to discuss this with my friend, with colleagues, and of course I've learned from my senior colleagues that the nature of the activities. So I believe that instead of, for example, in the beginning particularly, instead of giving group activities, full class activities, we should be giving pair activities, where each student has enough of time. If it is 2 hours class, every student, if they are doing pair activity, every student will have more than half an hour of activity in the classroom. So if we are doing that for full class, and there are 30 students in the classroom, you divide that 2 hours time, 120 minutes into 30 students, they won't get much time, 4 or 5 minutes, not more than that.
Exactly.
So that trend should also change. And then now there are good methods of teaching, communicative methods and direct methods where you do not, we skip that stage of learning grammar through translation. So we go directly, we expose the child, the learner, the student to the language. That makes it, a bit more speedy. The process becomes quicker. So that is how probably we can improve English language learning and teaching.
Very, very important points there. It's basically, the relatability, I think,
Yes.
to not think of it as something that is completely undoable, something that you can do, baby steps. For many people,
Yes.
you also, you hear this argument as well, that, why do I need to learn English? I'm doing okay without it. But then, as you said, it is a huge skill. And you never know in what part of your life you may need that skill.
Yes,
and that will give you an edge in any competitive field.
Yes. It is the global lingua franca, and it's now the tool of cross-cultural dialogue. And it is a loaded weapon, as they say. Language is the loaded weapon, and English is the most important loaded weapon. So in Pakistan, in other third world countries, it is a class-changing tool. If you are aiming at upward mobility, you need to learn this English language. So it should not be ignored. This huge important tool of the world. More than 90% of the research, academic work, is published in English. So how can we do away with something that is so important? So convincing, that's an important point, because most of my students, they are not fully convinced of the significance of the language. So when they're not convinced of that, they lack motivation.
That's true.
If they're dealing with it like another regular activity or another subject, they might not be putting in extra effort that is actually required. So that is also the job of the teachers, the senior, the learners who are at the advanced stages, to tell the juniors, the young learners, the beginners, that they have to convince of the significance of this. And I also tell the students that they should remind themselves of the incentives that they are going to win after they learn this language.
Definitely.
Yes.
And there's also no reason to be insecure. This is no changing of any identity.
Yes, that's true.
This is, who you are is who you are. Just learning another language does not change you in a way to be somebody else. Because I find that is also something.
In post-colonial studies, we see language is studied as a battleground, right? So we see these debates that once you learn another language, you actually learn another culture, which is not bad, because learning about other cultures is in fact adding to your strengths. So, but then there are also debates that any language can be indigenized. So is the case of English language. We can indigenize it. We can culturally load it. We can
use it to our advantage.
Yes. So and that is happening. Even our creative writers, they are indigenizing English language, post-colonializing it, or Pakistanizing it. We see. There are papers like English as Islamic language, English as Pakistani language, where we study those aspects of the language. I tell my students that we should not be worried about losing our cultural significant packets that are attached with the language, with every word.
I think that is a major concern, is it not?
Yes. So we can say, instead of saying good morning, which is not bad again, but still, if you want to say Assalamu alaikum, English does not prohibit you from saying Assalamu alaikum. And similarly, I mean, instead of saying see you tomorrow, you can add inshallah to that.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have cultural, religious discourse markers, we can have them, and they are already happening. So English, it used to be considered earlier at different universities even, that it were a lughatul, kuffar, or it's a language that is the language of totally another culture, so it will be doing damage. So that is not the case. Now English is everywhere in the world, and in different parts of the world it has been indigenized, and it is doing the local functions perfectly, and then the international role as well. So we should not be afraid of that. I mean, we are not losing our identity. And again, as you have said, that our identity is in our accent.
Yeah.
Our Urdu being one of the contact languages of English language in Pakistan, it is always there. I mean, anybody listening to us would be able to tell that you are from Pakistan. You are an Urdu speaking person. So there shouldn't be any fear.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Very, very important points there. Okay, we also spoke about language development. Do people realize the importance of language development? We use it all the time, with whatever language we're comfortable in speaking in. Do we realize this is responsibility that we have towards mastering the language that we're using?
I mean, there are two things. One is mastering the language at the individual level. The other thing is developing the language, as language itself, planning its corpus, making dictionaries in the language. As I've already said, computing the language, giving it online representation, digitalizing it, because now it's the age of digital humanities, digital, era where we talk. Everything is on the screens.
Yes.
It is shifting from printed pages to computer and mobile and iPad and all these screens. So I think in Pakistan, local languages as well as Urdu, they are being developed, but the pace is slow. The focus is, and again, maybe it's because of lack of awareness, lack of resources, lack of human resource, or there is probably no good medium of connecting them together. For example, as I was talking about, a couple of my friends who have done their degrees, PhDs in computational linguistics from Germany, from the USA, but they are not, the skills are not being used. So that awareness is important. We have different sangats, academies, language boards and literary boards for all the regional languages, provincial languages in Pakistan. But what they are doing is holding conferences, which is good, it's okay. Then doing, working on dictionaries, again, printed ones, and, doing, other things like publishing literature, poetry books and all that, which is not helping the development of these languages with that pace. So if they start developing corpus of these languages, parallel corpora, that would not only help in the development of one language, but also it will make the translation efficient. I mean, we need to make the process of translation more efficient, and that can happen if we bring all our languages on computer, and that needs a lot of effort, resources, brains, and skilled human resources.
And vision, as you said.
Yes.
Because you very rightly pointed out that things are actually happening, like it or not. They're happening on the digital arena.
Yes.
So you may have wonderful things going on elsewhere, but you want to bring that awareness to other people, and what better medium to have than the digitalization, which is a very, very important point. Okay, now getting back to, the students who are struggling with English and everything and all the tips that you've been given, another thing we find, I've heard many people complain about, and students being very worried about, in fact makes them very, very anxious as well, is the sudden, they've gone through school, they've gone through colleges, all of a sudden university is a totally different ballgame for them. And here they're very much in the focus, and they start understanding that this is a total different arena that they're
Yes.
in, they come to presentations.
Yes.
Already they're having problems with the language.
Yes.
What tips can you offer them? What should they do?
You have pointed it so rightly that we do have this disconnect between the intermediate level learning and then going for the tertiary level in the universities. For the schools, we have locally designed syllabus. Our own teachers, curricula developers, they work on that usually. So that is more grounded in our realities, and they focus on, they keep in mind the background of the students, their background languages and their background, social backgrounds and everything. But when it comes to university, most of the things that we teach, they directly come from the developed world.
Yeah.
Be it English or other subjects,
Yes.
sciences, anything, which is being taught in English. So that makes a sudden change. I mean, kind of the level of the contents that they are studying is so high in comparison with whatever they have already covered, that they feel it difficult. They find it difficult to cope up. So that is one thing. Secondly, presentations. Again, practice would come in. I usually see my students. They think that they should just research whatever the topic is and put it on the slides, go and present, because they have researched, they have enough of material that is already on the PowerPoint, so they can read from there and present.
From it, exactly.
Which is very, very much not what one should be doing. So I usually advise my students that they should be focusing on rehearsals, because reading is not advised. In Switzerland, the fourth biggest political party is called anti-PowerPoint political party. So I mean, because PowerPoint might not be that good, it stops you from memorizing, from keeping things in mind and saying that those things in a natural way.
And from comprehension as well.
Yes, and comprehension as well, because you have taken things from different sources, accumulated them, kind of compiled them, put them on the slideshow, and then start presenting, reading from there. That would not help neither the presenter nor the audience. So rehearsals for time, rehearsals for fluency, rehearsals for natural way of speaking, and then even for the stress pattern. That where to emphasize, what is your catchphrase, what is your punchline, so how to say that. So all that is very important, which I sometimes see missing in the efforts of our students.
That's very true. Another thing I would say is that in our schools, be the Urdu medium or English medium, we find that usually there's a few children who are always going to be in the top three.
Yes.
Whether it's academic, whether it's presentations, debates,
yes.
speeches, contests, whatever. You'll always see a specific 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who are going to be there. So those are the ones who have already mastered the public speaking.
Yes.
They've got their confidence going for them. What about the rest of those 30 or 35 or whatever, 20, 25 other children who are in that class, and each year they just look at them and they think, I wish I could do that. And they actually can, but it's the fear of trying, or maybe it's not the motivation from the parents, the teachers, or just believing in that child themselves. How can we help that? Because I feel that's a dilemma too.
Yes. One thing that we call as peer pressure. There is a lot of pressure of those 3 kids, 3 learners who are on top, because they have mastered most of the things already because of their good background, quality background as far as education is concerned. So they unknowingly, unconsciously are putting more pressure on the other 25 or 30 students. Now, they're not guilty of doing that, of course. It's then the responsibility of the teacher to balance it, to not allow this unconscious bullying on part of some students. I mean, they are brilliant, of course. They have good background. So I think that we as teachers in the classroom, should make announcements multiple times that all we would be assessing at the end of the semester is your efforts during the semester.
Yes.
So if you have improved, if you were at point C in the beginning of the semester and you reach point F, for example, or G, for instance, so you have done some mileage.
Right.
Okay, that is what matters for me as a teacher. That is
focusing
what
on the
should
progress.
Yes. Instead of having this in our students' mind that those three are
You have
already
to be
so
at the
good.
top,
Yes.
you know,
So
yeah.
so they have to go on to
Yeah.
compete with them,
Yeah, right.
and therefore they can't do anything. They are already being demotivated. So if students come with this mind that okay, they have to do their mileage, they are at a certain point in learning in their class, so their competition is with themselves, not with the rest of them.
Right.
So this position announcing and all that, probably that is also not good.
It's also detrimental
yes.
in a way,
Yes.
because then you're confining and labeling,
Yes.
certain elements of the classroom, and the rest of the children at that time they suffer from thinking, and they're all already labeling themselves as okay, there's no way I'm going to be that good enough. And I think that's the main thing that a person has to make a child, student, or even an adult, because you carry these things along with you for the rest of your life.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
That's
right.
true.
Okay, so unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Dr.
You're
Sheraz.
most welcome.
Everything you've talked about today I think is really, really important and extremely valuable for our viewers who are going to be watching.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Likewise, thank you for being here today. Okay, so we come to the end of today's program. There was so much there that you can benefit from. The importance of language, the language that you're using, and towards the end of the program, speaking about difficulties in specifically in the English language and how you can get past them. So, hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again next week. Bye-bye.